Shalom, dear friends. Shalom. This is Rabbi Schoenberg of the Jewish Center in Princeton, New Jersey. This week we're reading Parahsat Beshalach, crossing of the Red Sea. And there are lots of questions we have as to where did they cross, and if they crossed and the Egyptians drowned, where's the evidence of it? So I thought of the best way to answer this question that I would invite a friend of mine, Rabbi Benjamin Skolnick, who's currently the rabbi of Temple Beth Shalom in Hamden, Connecticut, but who is now leading an archaeological excavation in the Sinai to discover some of the answers. My friend Ben is the author of 11 books and 100 articles and a really wonderful pulpit rabbi. So Rabbi Skolnick, let's sort of get to the chase here. What exactly happened when the Israelites got to the Red Sea? Where is it and what happened?
Okay, so let's go back a step. There are people who are fundamentalist readers of the Bible, and they say every word that is in the Bible is literally true. And there are others who say this is just all myth. So a bunch of us, I'd written a book which sort of fits with what you were talking about. It says, if the Egyptians drowned in the Red Sea, where are Pharaoh's chariots? And I had a theory about what had happened. And as luck would have it, somebody read my book, somebody who has hundreds of millions of dollars. And before I knew it, we were off to the Sinai Peninsula trying to apply this theory. What we had were satellite photos showing a big rectangle in the sand. Nature doesn't make rectangles in the sand. And we got there and we found a city. Just to place this, we're talking about in the Sinai Peninsula. And we used science, mostly geology, but we used magnetometers. And we found a city that is mentioned in the Bible as being one of the 4 coordinates where the great miracle happened. In other words, I'm not starting out with the supposition there was a miracle. I'm asking myself, is there some way to explain how and when and where this all happened? And so the geologists, if you can share the screen, Rabbi Schoenberg, using, and these are not none of these people were Jewish. They came up with this map just to explain the Mediterranean would be now at the top of the map. So there was only one way out of Egypt. You can't see my finger, but you see where it says Hebwa? The only way out of Egypt to go to Israel was through there. You see there was a big lagoon. The lagoon had reeds in it. Yam Suf means reedy sea. The lagoon had, so our theory is, and again, this is based on scientific evidence, that the Mediterranean now is way up to the north of this map. This was the only way they could have gone out of Egypt. So if you see a place there called Tel El Borg, that's where we dug for a number of years, and we found a city. And so now what we can do is at least come up with a plausible explanation. If you see that brown line, right, that the Israelites went through there and they had to cross through that lagoon. There could have been a tidal wave or something, and they could have crossed, and the Egyptians could have been drowned. So you can drop the map or the screen share. But so that's at least an idea of where. That is, if the Israelites left Egypt, at this time, this was the only route they could have taken. The Bible gives you 4 coordinates. It talks about the sea. It talks about Pi Hachirot. It talks about Baal Tzafon. And it talks about Migdol. This is Migdol. In other words, if the Bible's giving you 4 coordinates, it wants you to know where this happened. Pi Hachirot, Pi means mouth. Hachirot means the diggings. We found that Egyptian canals, which are diggings, came to this place. So we have the sea, we have Pi Hachirot. What is Baal Tzafon? Baal Tzafon, think of the word Baal, the pagan god. Tzafon means north. It was a place on the coast where seafarers would pray before they would cross the Mediterranean. So what we have here is at least a plausible geographical, topographical model for where this happened, and also how it might have happened without a miracle, without even God in the picture. The idea is that because there could have been a tidal wave. And so that at least gives a theory about how and where and when and why. There's another more basic question is, how do we know the Israelites were even slaves in Egypt to begin with? Right? The best answer I ever heard for this is a common sense answer. Nobody would make up that they were slaves. In the ancient world, that was the ultimate humiliation. You would make up that you were a king. You would make up that you were invaded. You wouldn't make up that you were slaves for hundreds of years. To be a slave was worse than death. The Israelites would not have made up a story about being enslaved. They might make up a story of triumph, but not a story of slavery. And other places in this PowerPoint that I can't show you right now, we have found pictures of Semitic slaves. So we dug in this place for a number of years, and we found evidence of Ramses II. Ramses II was the pharaoh in the 1200s where we can pinpoint the Exodus to have happened. How can we pinpoint the Exodus to have happened in the 1200s? Because of the Merneptah stele, which is again on the PowerPoint, but we can't show all of these things in 5 minutes, right? But the Merneptah stele puts the Israelites in Canaan in the late 1200s. So we know that they'd come to Canaan by then. So that gives us the time. We also know a lot about Ramses II. And so then we found his inscriptions in this place, Migdol. We also found something else, which is just sort of fun. We found reed huts. You would call them sukkahs. We found reed huts, and inside where those reed huts had been, that is the remains of these reed huts, we found pottery. And you know, we had all these different experts, and so the ceramics people, the pottery people, were able to show that these pots came from Canaan. That is, they came from what we would call Israel. We found pottery from that time. Like if you hear a song, you hear the Bee Gees disco song, you know that it comes from the 80s. Well, somebody who's an expert in pottery can tell you where and when this pot came from. And the remains of these pots that we found in these places came from Canaan from that century.
So Ben, if we're sitting in shul or we're on Zoom this Shabbat, and we're reading about the crossing of the
Right.
Red Sea, what's the final message here? What's the takeaway for my congregants here?
Okay, I don't think Red Sea is the right phrase. It says Yam Suf. That's not Yam Edom. It's the Reedy Sea, and I think that's the lagoon. The takeaway that I think that I would say is this really may have happened, right? Just to be purely objective, we have a map that shows, you know, where and what happened. That's for you to interpret. I would say to you that a miracle can be when certain things happen at just the right time, right? If Rabbi Schoenberg is lost in Africa, and I happen to be driving by and I pick him up and get him out of Africa, that's a miracle. Now you could say it's just a coincidence. You just happen to be driving by in Africa and Rabbi Schoenberg happened to be lost there. So there's an old Jewish joke about what's the essence of Jewish humor. You know, ask me, what is the essence of Jewish humor?
What is the essence
Timing.
of Jewish humor?
Timing. Okay, so what made it a miracle might have been just there happened to be a tidal wave in the right place at the right time, and we interpreted that as a miracle. But
thank you, Rabbi Skolnick. Deeply appreciate your sense of humor.
Okay.
And your wisdom very much. My dear friends, this Shabbat, as you sit down at the Friday night table, you have a lot to discuss. What happened at the Reed Sea? Did it really happen? Was it a miracle or was it real? Thank you for joining us And to my friend Ben, thank you. And to my dear congregation, Shabbat Shalom.